The Jeep Wrangler's tires crunched over the oyster shell drive of the Grand Hamptons Retreat, the kind of place that made the cover of Architectural Digest every July. White clapboard, black shutters, hydrangeas the size of beach umbrellas, and a lawn that rolled all the way down to the Atlantic like it had been manicured by God himself. I killed the engine and sat for a second, letting the salt wind slip through the open window. The Jeep was 12 years old, paint sun-bleached to the color of a faded Polaroid, mud still clinging to the fenders from this morning's site visit upstate. It smelled like pine needles, wet dog, and the faint diesel I could never quite scrub out of the upholstery. Home smells, real smells. I stepped out in a cream cashmere polo and dark designer jeans tucked into broken-in R.M. Williams boots. Quiet luxury, the kind nobody in this zip code bothered to notice unless you were already on the list. The valet, a 20-something kid in navy shorts and boat shoes, hair slicked like he'd been born on a yacht, took one look at the Jeep and curled his lip. "Deliveries use the service road past the tennis courts, ma'am." He said ma'am the way people in the Hamptons say the help. I smiled, slow. "I'm a guest." He actually laughed. "Guest parking is reserved. You can leave the keys with me and walk around back." Before I could answer, the double doors flew open and Mia came running out in a cloud of ivory silk and panic. My little sister, 26, going on 16 when she was nervous, had her rehearsal dinner dress on already, hair in loose waves, cheeks flushed under too much highlighter. "Liv, oh my God, what are you wearing?" She hissed it like I'd shown up in pajamas. "And that Jeep, everybody can see it from the terrace. The Vanderbilts are already here. Please, please just park in the staff lot. I'll die if they think you're—" She stopped herself, but the word hung in the air anyway. Staff. I felt it land right between my ribs, the same spot it always did. Mia's hands fluttered like trapped birds. "Dad and Linda are watching. Preston's mom is literally holding court up there with the Astor cousins. This wedding is my one shot, Liv. Please don't ruin it." I looked past her to the wide porch where champagne flutes caught the late afternoon sun. Sure enough, there was Dad, James Harper, real estate developer turned perpetual almost made it, standing next to Beatrice Vanderbilt like they'd been friends since boarding school. Linda, wife number 3, clutched his arm and laughed too loud at something Beatrice said. And there was Preston Vanderbilt himself, all Nantucket red pants and inherited arrogance, already eyeing the circular drive like he owned it. He did. 2 years ago, I closed on this property for $48 million cash through Harper Luxe Group. I started with one crumbling motel off the Belt Parkway in Brooklyn the week I graduated Wharton. Flipped it, leveraged it, repeated until I owned half the independent luxury boutiques from Montauk to the Hudson Valley. Nobody in my family knew because nobody ever asked what I actually did for a living. To them, I was still the stubborn kid who refused to join Dad's failing firm, the daughter who wasted her trust fund on some dirtbag motel instead of a starter apartment on the Upper East Side. I paid Mia's NYU tuition when Dad cut her off for choosing Tisch over Columbia business. I was 24, working 80-hour weeks, wiring $30,000 a semester from accounts he never knew existed. I held her when she cried after Mom's funeral. I taught her how to parallel park, how to do taxes, how to spot a fake Birkin from 20 feet away. And now she was begging me to sneak in the back door so I wouldn't embarrass her in front of people who summered in houses with names. I swallowed the taste of iron. Service entrance it is. Mia exhaled like I'd handed her oxygen. "Thank you. I owe you. Just stay low-key tonight, okay? They're old money. They notice everything." She kissed the air near my cheek and hurried back inside, heels clicking across the marble like a countdown. The valet smirked and held out his ticket book. I dropped the keys into his palm without a word and walked around the east wing, past the herb garden and the humming of the kitchen exhaust fans. The ocean roared somewhere beyond the dunes, steady and indifferent. I could have told them right then, could have pulled out my phone, opened the Master Key app, and watched every jaw on that terrace drop straight to the herringbone brick. But some part of me, the part that still remembered being 16 and invisible, wanted to see how far they'd push it first. So I took a breath of salt and cut flowers, squared my shoulders, and disappeared through the staff door like the nobody they'd decided I was. 800 words exactly, and the game had just begun. The salt air stung my cheeks as I pushed through the staff door, the kind of invisible entryway that kept the Hamptons' illusions intact. Behind me, the valet was probably already parallel parking my Jeep next to the dumpsters, snickering with the grounds crew about the delivery girl and designer jeans. Mia's words echoed in my head like a bad loop. "They'll think you're staff anyway. Please don't embarrass me." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat, the humiliation tasting like the cheap diner coffee I'd lived on during my first flip. But deeper than that, Dad's voice from last night's call replayed on repeat. "If you show up at all, stay out of sight, Olivia. The Vanderbilts are old money, real East Coast royalty. This is Mia's ticket to the good life. Don't screw it up with your whatever it is you do these days." Whatever it is you do, as if building an empire from scratch was a hobby? I leaned against the cool tile wall of the service corridor, letting the hum of the industrial dishwasher drown out the terrace laughter drifting in from outside. My fingers itched for my phone, for the app that could summon Sarah, the general manager I'd poached from the plaza last year, and have that valet packing his bags in under 5 minutes. Hell, I could cancel the whole damn wedding with one email to the events team. Unforeseen maintenance. Apologies for the inconvenience. Refund? What refund? Because this wasn't just any beachside resort. The Grand Hamptons Retreat was mine. I'd bought it outright 2 years ago. The crown jewel of Harper Luxe Group, my hospitality conglomerate that started as a pipe dream in a Brooklyn walk-up. After Mom died, breast cancer, quick and cruel when I was 18, Dad had checked out. He remarried Linda, the social climber with a penchant for Botox and bridge clubs, and poured what was left of his failing real estate deals into keeping up appearances. Mia, barely 12, became his golden child, the one he spoiled to make up for the mess he'd made of our family. Me? I was the afterthought, the one who skipped the debutante balls to wait tables and save for Wharton. Dad called it rebellion when I turned down his offer to join Harper Properties, his sinking ship of over-leveraged condos in Queens. "You're throwing away tradition," he'd said. Tradition? More like his ego. So I borrowed against my student loans, bought a rundown motel in Sheepshead Bay for pennies on the dollar, flipped it in 6 months, turned the profit into 2 more properties upstate. Rinse, repeat. By 25, I had a portfolio worth 7 figures. By 32, Harper Luxe Group was a quiet powerhouse. Boutique hotels from the Catskills to the Outer Banks, all under the radar, because I liked it that way. No press releases, no Vanity Fair profiles, just results. The Grand Hamptons Retreat? I'd snapped it up when the previous owners went under during the pandemic. $48 million, negotiated down to $42 because I knew their books better than they did. Nobody in my family had a clue. To them, I was still Liv, the one who lives on that farm upstate, scraping by on vague consulting gigs. Mia sent me pity texts about finding myself. Dad? He hadn't asked about my life since the day I told him I wasn't coming home for Thanksgiving 8 years ago. I could blow it all up right now. Fire the valet for insubordination. March up to that terrace and announce to Beatrice Vanderbilt and her pearl-clutching crew that the ground they were sipping Vouv on belonged to me. Watch Dad's face crumple as he realized his failure of a daughter had outbuilt him tenfold. But I didn't, because buried under the anger, that stupid, stubborn part of me still wanted his approval. The American dream bullshit they fed us in school, the self-made success story, was supposed to end with the prodigal return, right? The underdog proving everyone wrong, getting the pat on the back. Mia could chase her fairy tale marriage to Declan Vanderbilt, trading her theater degree for a spot in the social register. That was her path, dependency dressed up as destiny. Me? I'd clawed my way up alone. No trust funds or connections, just grit and spreadsheets. But damn if I didn't still crave Dad seeing it, acknowledging that his overlooked kid had become the boss. So I straightened up, tucked my polo into my jeans, and headed deeper into the kitchen. If they wanted me invisible, fine, I'd play the part. But I'd make sure Mia's big day went off without a hitch. Perfect service, flawless execution. Maybe then, in the glow of it all, Dad would finally look at me and see something worth respecting. Or maybe not. Either way, the clock was ticking and the real show hadn't even started. The service corridor spat me out into the kitchen like a secret the building didn't want to keep. Stainless steel everywhere, steam curling off lobster pots, the air thick with garlic butter, lemon zest, and the sweet char of sourdough from the bread ovens. Saturday night before a Vanderbilt wedding meant controlled chaos. Runners shouting in 3 languages, runners sliding trays like hockey pucks, the expediter barking, "behind," every 5 seconds. I inhaled it the way other people breathe oxygen. This was my world, even if nobody here knew it yet. Problem number 1 hit me before I'd taken 10 steps. 2 pallets of vintage Veuve Clicquot sitting on the prep island, corks sweating, bottles already pushing 72 degrees. The walk-in champagne fridge had thrown a compressor error. Somebody had overloaded it with caviar trays, and now the toast was 90 minutes away. I could hear the head sommelier 2 stations over having a quiet meltdown into his headset. I didn't think. I just moved. "Marco," I called to the executive chef, 6'4", Naples by way of Staten Island, forearms like prosciutto, while already grabbing 2 stainless hotel pans. "Ice me, rock salt, now." He glanced up from plating scallops, saw my face, and decided questioning me wasn't worth the time. 30 seconds later, I had a slurry of ice, water, and half a box of kosher salt. I plunged the first dozen bottles neck deep, spinning them like I was back in that Sheep's Head Bay motel, teaching myself how to chill Prosecco for $20 a pop. 4 minutes flat. I pulled one out, pressed it to my wrist the way my first GM taught me. 51 degrees. Perfect. Marco whistled low. "Where the hell did you learn that trick, Brooklyn?" "Trade secret," I said, and kept spinning. By the time the sommelier arrived, red-faced and apologizing, the crisis was over. 36 bottles, chilled, labeled, and loaded onto rolling carts like nothing had happened. Marco wiped his hands on the towel tucked in his belt and looked at me the way chefs look at people they suddenly respect. "You agency?" he asked. "Something like that." He reached into a cubby, pulled out a crisp black waistcoat with the hotel's discreet gold crest, and tossed it over. "Cover the cashmere, Cara. You're too pretty to be back here. But you just saved my ass. Earn your keep tonight and dinner's on me after service." I slipped the vest on. It fit like it had been waiting for me. That was when Sarah appeared in the doorway. My Sarah. General manager, ex-Ritz-Carlton legend. The woman I'd stolen with a signing bonus and a promise of real equity. The black waistcoat turned me into furniture. Guests flowed around me like water around a rock. Never eye contact, never a thank you, just the occasional flick of fingers for another flute of Veuve. I moved through the ballroom carrying a silver tray balanced on one palm, shoulders relaxed, face blank. Perfect invisibility. The string quartet was playing something soft and Vivaldi adjacent. The terrace doors stood open to the ocean breeze, carrying the smell of money and sunscreen. I drifted toward the south alcove, a little velvet-lined nook meant for grandmothers who needed to sit. Tonight it was occupied by 2 people who definitely didn't want witnesses. Beatrice Vanderbilt stood with her back half-turned, emeralds flashing at her throat every time she moved. Her son, Preston, lounged in one of the Louis XVI chairs, one ankle crossed over the other knee, the sole of his loafer flashing that telltale red. He was 28 going on 50, with the kind of tan that came from yachts, not beaches you actually swam at. I slowed my steps, letting the ambient clink of crystal swallow the sound of my shoes. "Absolutely not negotiable," Beatrice was saying, voice low and surgical. "We run the video at the Toast. That sorority mixer, junior year, spring formal, she's crying into a red Solo cup, mascara everywhere, screaming that nobody's ever going to love her for real. It's devastating. And public." Preston snorted. "Mother, that's evil even for you." "It's strategy," she corrected, examining a fresh manicure like she was checking a balance sheet. "We break her first, make her feel small, unworthy of the Vanderbilt name. Then the revised prenup looks like mercy. She signs away the Harper Trust, $3.8 million last I checked, and any future claim on the estate." "Broken girls are easy to control, darling. Your father taught me that." My tray trembled. Just once. I steadied it, but the champagne flutes chimed like tiny alarms. Preston shifted, and the light caught his wrist. A Daytona, supposedly vintage. I'd seen enough real ones at watch auctions in Geneva to know the second-hand sweep was wrong. Quartz movement in a $40,000 case. Fake. The kind of detail that made my stomach turn cold and analytical. "And if she still won't sign?" he asked. "Then we escalate," Beatrice said calmly. "But she will. They always do. I already paid the AV kid $2,000 cash. He'll swap the cute little slideshow Mia approved for our version the second the best man starts his speech. By the time she realizes, 200 phones will have it." I felt the rage rise, hot, familiar, protective. Mia at 19, drunk and heartbroken because some lacrosse player ghosted her after formal. I'd held her hair that night in a bathroom that smelled like vodka and Victoria's Secret body spray. I'd driven her back to the city at 4 a.m. so Dad wouldn't find out, and now they wanted to weaponize it. Beatrice smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her emerald silk gown. "Go keep Declan distracted. Make sure he's too busy proposing toasts to notice his bride spiraling." Preston unfolded himself from the chair, smirking. "Yes, ma'am." They swept past me, close enough that Beatrice's perfume stung my eyes, and never once looked up. Just the help. I stood frozen for 3 heartbeats, tray still balanced, every muscle locked. The hurt sister in me wanted to scream, to march straight to Mia and drag her out of this viper nest. The CEO, the woman who'd sat across from hedge fund sharks and never blinked, took over instead. Cold, calculating, strategic. I couldn't stop the wedding outright. Mia would blame me, call it jealousy, sabotage. Dad would back her up, same as always. I needed proof. Irrefutable, public, humiliating proof that would shred the Vanderbilt leverage before they could use it. I slipped into a service alcove, set the tray down, and pulled out my phone. The staff app Sarah had built for me showed every camera feed, every payment log, every file on the AV server. I opened the payment dashboard first, force of habit. Filtered for today, cash transactions over $1,000. There it was, $2,000, logged at 1417, notation AV Services Special Request, initialed BV. Next, I pulled up the presentation queue. The real slideshow, Mia and Declan on sailboats in Central Park, all golden hour filters, was still there. But a second file had been uploaded 23 minutes ago. Title, mh_formal_fail_final.move. Size, 187 megabytes. I didn't need to watch it to know what it was. My jaw locked so tight I felt it in my temples. I glanced toward the ballroom doors. Sarah stood near the hostess stand, scanning the crowd. Our eyes met for half a second. I gave the tiniest shake of my head. Stay back. She understood immediately, melting into the background like only the best GMs can. I needed more. Bankruptcy filings, creditor lists, anything that proved the Vanderbilts weren't old money anymore. They were just old. I needed it clean, public, and timed perfectly. Because if they wanted to play dirty, I'd play surgical. I took a breath, picked up my tray, and glided back into the ballroom. The quartet had moved on to Poshbowl. Guests laughed too loud, already half drunk on free champagne and their own importance. Let them laugh. In less than 2 hours, the only sound they'd be making would be gasps. The ballroom pulsed like a living thing, chandeliers glittering, laughter ricocheting off the ocean view windows, the faint bass of a future DJ testing levels in the garden. I kept circulating, tray light now, only 4 flutes left, face neutral. Invisibility was easy when no one expected you to matter. Then a hand landed low on my back, thumb deliberately brushing the waistband of my jeans beneath the waistcoat. Too low, too familiar. "Careful, sweetheart," Preston Vanderbilt drawled, breath hot with Macallan and entitlement. "That tray's worth more than your rent." He let his fingers linger a second longer, then flicked ash from his contraband cigar straight onto my polished silver. "Run along now. Some of us have actual celebrating to do." A year ago, I would have broken his wrist. Tonight, I just stepped sideways, smiled the small, lethal smile I usually saved for boardrooms, and said, "Of course, sir," in the exact tone that made men twice his age nervous. He laughed and sauntered off, already bored. I dumped the tray at the nearest station, hands shaking, not from fear, from pure, distilled rage. I wiped the ash away with a linen napkin like I was erasing fingerprints from a crime scene. 20 minutes later, I was topping flutes near the grand piano when a hedge fund guy in a linen suit did a double take. "Hang on," he said, pointing with his champagne. "Olivia Harper? You spoke at the Women in Luxury Summit in Midtown last spring. Something about sustainable hospitality ROI. Incredible talk." My blood froze. I opened my mouth, already calculating damage control, when Beatrice Vanderbilt materialized like smoke in a green silk gown. "Darling, you're confused," she trilled, laying a manicured hand on the investor's arm. "She's just staff. Agency, I believe. They all start to look the same after a few glasses, don't they?" She flashed the smile that had terrorized Southampton for 3 decades and steered him away before he could argue. I stood there holding the bottle, knuckles white. The woman who'd once stared down a room full of Fortune 500 CEOs, reduced to scenery. Again. Enough. I slipped through the side door into the east corridor, the one lined with vintage black and white photos of the property from the 1920s. I needed Dad. Needed him to listen for 5 goddamn seconds before this became a war. I spotted him through the open French doors, James Harper, bourbon in hand, clapping Reginald Vanderbilt on the shoulder like they were old Yale roommates instead of a failed developer and a bankrupt one. Linda hovered nearby, clutching her clutch like it might fly away. I caught Dad's eye and jerked my head toward the corridor. His face darkened instantly. Same scowl he'd worn when I told him I was buying that first motel instead of taking the safe job at his friend's brokerage. But he followed. The hallway was quiet, cool, smelling faintly of cedar and money. The second we were alone, he rounded on me. "What the hell are you doing pulling me away from?" "Dad, listen." I kept my voice low, urgent. "The Vanderbilts are broke. Chapter 11, filed 3 weeks ago. They're planning to humiliate Mia at the toast, run an old video from college, force her to sign a new prenup that strips her of Grandma's trust. They're predators." His face went the color of rare steak. You poisonous little. I'm not jealous. I'm protecting her. He grabbed my upper arm hard enough to bruise, fingers digging through cashmere and waistcoat alike. You can't stand it, can you? Mia landed a Vanderbilt, and you're still playing farmer upstate with your pathetic little Airbnb shacks. This is her future, Olivia. Don't you dare ruin it because you're bitter. Dad, I have proof. You have nothing. Spit flecked my cheek. I told you to stay invisible. You and that rust bucket Jeep embarrass us enough. Get out of my sight before I have security drag you out myself. I tried one last time. Dad, I own this hotel. He barked a laugh that echoed off the paneled walls. Right, and I'm the king of Manhattan. You're delusional, always have been. This is why your mother would be ashamed. I stopped listening. Something inside me clicked off, clean as a circuit breaker. 32 years of chasing this man's approval, and he just called the empire I'd built from nothing a delusion. I looked at the hand still squeezing my arm and felt nothing. Okay, I said, voice flat. I'll handle it my way. I walked away, didn't flinch when he kept shouting, didn't look back. In the service alcove, I pulled my phone again, opened the internal finance app Sarah and I had built. Vanderbilt final payment, $78,500 for the weekend, flagged red. 3 declines in the last hour. Insufficient funds. Industry whispers of a Chapter 11 filing were now confirmed by the Black Card network itself. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Game on. The corridor lights felt too bright after Dad's words, like someone had turned the contrast up on the entire world. His voice still rang in my ears, raw and ugly. You're dead to me. The same line he'd used on Mom's oncologist when the bills got too high, on his business partner when the Queen's condos tanked, on anyone who dared point out that James Harper's version of reality was cracked straight down the middle. I kept walking, past the black and white photographs of Gatsby-era parties I personally chosen for these walls, past a busser who startled when he saw my face and nearly dropped a stack of plates. My heels didn't make a sound on the runner carpet, but inside my head, something enormous collapsed, quiet, final, and surprisingly painless. 32 years. 32 years of report cards mailed to an address he never bothered to update. 32 years of wiring tuition money for Mia while pretending it came from a scholarship. 32 years of swallowing every, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" and "When are you going to get a real job?" 32 years of flying private to close 8-figure deals and still driving a 12-year-old Jeep because I wanted him to ask, just once, Liv, how did you do all this? I had built Harper Luxe Group into a $160 million portfolio while he was busy pretending his last development still had permits. I had paid the property taxes on the Sag Harbor house he claimed was family legacy, so the bank wouldn't foreclose. I had sat in this very hotel 2 Thanksgivings ago, alone in the owner's suite, eating room service turkey because he told Mia needed a normal holiday without drama. And tonight, he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave fingerprints and called me a liar in my own hallway. I stopped outside the kitchen doors, pressed my back to the cool wall, and let it hit me. It felt like setting down a briefcase I'd been carrying since I was 12 years old. One of those battered Wall Street briefcases, scuffed leather, brass buckles, stuffed with someone else's expectations, someone else's failures, someone else's version of who I was supposed to be. I'd lugged it through dorm rooms and red-eye flights, through every closing dinner and lonely Christmas. I'd let it define the shape of my shoulders. And now, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, I simply opened my hand. The briefcase was gone. There was no cinematic thunderclap, no tears, no dramatic gasp, just sudden, staggering lightness. The kind of lightness you feel when you finally realize the weight was never yours to begin with. He didn't love me. He never had. He loved the idea of a daughter who would reflect his own faded glory back at him. A shiny accessory to prove the Harper name still meant something in the Hamptons. When I refused to be that accessory, I became the scapegoat instead. Fine. I exhaled, long and slow, tasting salt and kitchen butter and freedom. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Sarah checking if I was okay, but I didn't look. I didn't need rescuing anymore. The scared kid who'd once hidden under the bleachers during Dad's screaming matches at Little League games was gone. The woman standing here now had closed bigger deals before breakfast than he'd managed in a decade. I rolled my shoulders once, like a fighter stepping into the ring, and felt the waistcoat settle differently. Not as camouflage anymore, as armor. Dad wanted me dead to him? Perfect. Dead women don't ask permission. I pushed through the kitchen doors. The noise hit me like a wave, but I was already moving with purpose. Marco glanced up from plating desserts, took one look at my face, and went very still. Whatever he saw made him reach into his coat pocket without a word and slide the master key card across the steel counter toward me. I picked it up, warm from his hand, and met his eyes. "Thank you," I said. He nodded once and turned back to his chocolate ganache. Somewhere out there, Beatrice Vanderbilt was polishing her poison. Somewhere out there, my father was laughing with men who couldn't pay their bar tab. Let them. I had work to do. The kitchen had gone from chaos to that eerie pre-service calm where every plate is ready and every station is waiting for the first order to drop. Marco was wiping down his cutting board with a side towel, slow and deliberate, when I stepped back through the swing doors. He didn't look up right away, but I knew he'd seen everything through the pass-through window. Dad's grip on my arm, the shouting, the way I'd walked out without flinching. He kept wiping. The towel made soft circles on the wood. I started past him toward the corridor, and that's when his hand moved, quick as carving a fillet. The master key card appeared on the steel counter between us, like a playing card laid down in a game neither of us had named. Black magnetic stripe, gold foil crest, the one that opened every door in the building, including the ones marked authorized personnel only. The one only 3 people on property were supposed to have: Sarah, the chief engineer, and me. Marco still didn't speak. He just nudged it an inch closer with 2 knuckles, then went back to his board like nothing happened. I picked it up. It was warm from his pocket. "I designed the system myself," I said quietly. "When I bought the place, I told the security contractor I wanted a hardware backdoor nobody could patch out. They thought I was paranoid. Turns out, I just knew my family." Marco gave the smallest huff, almost a laugh. "Good design, boss." Boss. He'd never called me that before, not once. I slipped the card into the inner pocket of the waistcoat, right against my heart. "You didn't see this." "See what?" He flicked the towel over his shoulder and turned to check his mise en place. "I'm blind tonight, Kara. Too much saffron." I felt the corner of my mouth lift, the first real smile I'd worn all day. Loyalty like this wasn't bought with paychecks. It was earned in moments exactly like this one. I left him to his station and headed for the restricted hallway that led to the AV booth and server room. The master keycard felt heavier than its plastic weight, like it carried every person in this building who'd chosen to stand with me instead of against me. Sarah would be waiting near the hostess stand, ready to run interference. Marco had just given me the skeleton key to the entire property. And somewhere in the ballroom, Beatrice Vanderbilt was counting down to her little moment of triumph. She had no idea the countdown was already mine. I was halfway down the restricted hallway, master keycard already in hand, when the click-clack of stilettos ricocheted behind me like gunfire. "Excuse me."
Beatrice Vanderbilt's voice could have frozen the Atlantic. "Where do you think you're going?" I didn't slow. 20 feet to the AV security junction. 15. I said stop. Her hand clamped onto my shoulder, nails digging through the waistcoat and cashmere like talons. I turned, just as 2 contract security guards rounded the corner, radios crackling. New hires, weekend muscle from some Long Island firm. I didn't know their faces, which meant they sure as hell didn't know mine. Beatrice pointed with a trembling, diamond-laden finger. "This woman is a thief. I saw her take Mrs. Astor's wallet from the coat check not 5 minutes ago. Search her." The taller guard hesitated half a second, but Beatrice was already in full performance mode, voice climbing an octave. "Do your jobs. She's been lurking all evening, eavesdropping on conversations. Get her away from my son's wedding before she ruins everything." And there, at the mouth of the hallway, appeared James Harper, my father, glass in hand, face flushed with bourbon and second-hand importance. Our eyes locked. This was it, the moment any decent parent would step in and say, "That's my daughter, you're mistaken." Instead, he looked straight through me, took a sip, and turned back toward the ballroom laughter. Message received. I let my shoulders curl inward, eyes widen, the full damsel. "I didn't take anything, I swear, please." The guards moved fast. Rough hands patted pockets, found the master key card and my phone. Beatrice's eyes glittered when the card came out. "See? Restricted access. She's been planning this all night." The shorter guard shrugged. "We'll hold her till PD sorts it out." "Paint fumes, one of the holding rooms under renovation," the taller one muttered. "Use the server room. Locks from outside, no windows." They marched me past the AV booth where 2 of the Vanderbilts' private bodyguards stood like statues, past supply closets and humming ice machines, and shoved me into a narrow, windowless room that smelled of ozone, dust, and new carpet glue. Racks of blinking servers lined both walls. A single metal folding chair sat in the middle like an afterthought. The door slammed. The maglock clicked with satisfying finality. Beatrice's voice floated through, triumphant and shrill. "Keep her there. If she so much as a napkin goes missing tonight, I'll know who to blame." Footsteps faded. Then silence, broken only by the low hum of cooling fans. I counted to 10, slow, letting my pulse settle. Then I smiled in the dark. They thought they'd caged a thief. They'd actually locked me inside the central nervous system of the entire hotel. I stepped to the auxiliary rack, fingers brushing the warm metal like greeting an old friend. Right there, at knee height, was the maintenance port I'd insisted on during the 2022 refit. Physical access only, no remote disable, because sometimes the owner wanted to walk in and touch the wires herself. I pulled the thin cable from the hidden pocket sewn inside my waistcoat, the one Sarah teased me about being James Bond cosplay, and plugged my phone straight into the admin backbone. Screen lit up, full root access, no logging required. First, Pacer Database, Eastern District of New York. Vanderbilt Family Holdings, LLC, Chapter 11, filed October 31st. Debt, $47.8 million. Creditors circling like sharks. Second, internal accounting. Today's final reception payment, $78,500, declined 3 times. Hard decline, insufficient funds. Third, AV server. The poison file was right where I expected. MH_formal_fail.mov, queued to override at 20:03 during the best man toast. Fourth, CCTV archive. Perfect 4K clip of Beatrice slipping a thick envelope to the sound tech at 14:22 this afternoon, her lips readable. Make sure it plays exactly at the toast, no mistakes. I worked fast, muscle memory from 100 late nights in this very room when we were installing the new system. 90 seconds later, I had a new presentation built,
12 slides, brutal in their simplicity. Bankruptcy docket, foreclosure notice on the Greenwich estate, screenshot of the declined charge, still frame of Beatrice's cash handoff with audio synced. And the cherry live feed of the ballroom right now, time-stamped, so no one could claim it was old footage. I queued it to every screen in the house, priority override, no manual cancel, password protected by the only credentials on property that mattered, mine. Then I unlocked 2 doors remotely, this one and the private elevator to the owner's penthouse suite where my emergency gown hung in the closet. I checked the time, 19:11, 52 minutes until the toast. Plenty. I disconnected the cable, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and leaned against the humming rack like a woman waiting for room service. Outside, I heard Beatrice laughing again, high and brittle, already tasting victory. Enjoy it while it lasts, I thought, because in less than an hour, the only one of us would still be standing. And it sure as hell wasn't going to be the woman who just locked the owner in her own server room. The server fans hummed like a lullaby only I could hear. Blue LEDs blinked across the racks, painting the dark and cold electric light. I sat cross-legged on the metal chair, phone plugged straight into the maintenance port, the custom app Sarah and I had built after too many glasses of Barolo one night in Napa. She'd called it the nuclear football. Tonight, it was exactly that. I worked fast, the way I used to in that first Sheep's Head Bay motel when the Wi-Fi was stolen from the Dunkin' next door and the books had to balance before sunrise. First, Pacer, Eastern District of New York, Case 1-24-BK-11847. Vanderbilt Family Holdings, LLC, Chapter 11 petition filed 31 days ago. Liabilities, $47.8 million. Secured creditors, a consortium of banks that had already started seizing yachts and horses. Unsecured, vendors, caterers, even the florist for Knight's wedding. I downloaded the docket, the creditor matrix, the foreclosure notice on the Greenwich mansion, all stamped official, impossible to fake. Second, internal accounting. Filtered for cash transactions over $1,000 today. There it was, $1417, $2,000, AV Services Special Request, initialed BV. Receipt attached, Beatrice's looping signature clear as day. Third, CCTV. I pulled the 4K feed from the service corridor at 1422. Beatrice in her emerald dress sliding a fat envelope to the sound tech, a kid who looked barely old enough to drink the champagne he was supposed to sabotage. Audio from the directional mic was pristine. Make sure it plays exactly when the best man says, "To the bride." No mistakes or you don't get the second half. I watched her face on the frozen frame, lips curled in satisfaction, and felt something ancient and Brooklyn rise up in me. I was 12 when Mom got sick. Dad was already checked out, chasing deals that never closed, chasing Linda who still had her original nose. I learned to stretch ground beef 3 ways, to forge Mom's signature on school forms, to smile at the hospital billing office so they'd let us pay $20 a month. When Mom died, Dad told me to be strong for Mia. Translation, disappear. So I did the opposite. I got loud in the only way that mattered. I got good with money. I bought that first motel with a credit card advance and a prayer. I slept in the office on an air mattress while I learned drywall and zoning laws and how to smile at bankers who looked at a 22-year-old girl like she was a joke. Every time someone told me I couldn't, I bought another property just to prove the books wrong. This hotel, this was supposed to be the one I brought them to someday. The big reveal. Look, Dad, I built something bigger than you ever dreamed. Instead, they made me park in the back and called me staff. Fine. I dragged every file into the presentation deck. 12 slides, black background, white text, brutal in their simplicity. Slide 1, the bankruptcy docket. Slide 2, the Greenwich foreclosure. Slide 3,
the declined $78,500 charge, time-stamped 1604 today. Hard decline. Insufficient funds. Slide 4, the $2,000 cash envelope. Slide 5, the CCTV still of Beatrice mid-handoff with the audio waveform underneath so no one could claim it was doctored. I synced the directional mic clip to play over the image of her handing the money. We break her first. Broken girls are easy to control. I cued it to every screen in the ballroom, garden, and terrace. Priority override level 1. No manual cancel. Password, the maiden name of the grandmother whose trust they were trying to steal. Poetic. Then I unlocked 2 doors from the inside, this server room and the private elevator that went straight to the owner's penthouse on the 5th floor, the one nobody knew existed except Sarah and the architect who'd signed an NDA thicker than the Bible. I unplugged the cable, stood up, and rolled my neck once. The scared kid from Brooklyn who used to count quarters for subway fare was gone. The woman in the waistcoat now had root access to an entire empire and a family who just handed her the perfect stage. I opened the door. The hallway was empty, the party noise muffled and far away. I slipped off the waistcoat, folded it neatly, and left it on a housekeeping cart, like shedding a skin. 50 minutes until the toast. I took the service stairs 2 at a time, the ocean wind already whispering through the open windows above. Tonight, the Vanderbilts were going to learn what happens when you lock a self-made woman in a room full of her own weapons. And my father? He was going to watch every second. The mezzanine balcony was dark except for the soft glow of the chandelier below. I stood at the railing in midnight blue silk that cost more than most people's cars, hair loose, face clean of kitchen steam and humiliation. The gown had been hanging in the owner's suite for exactly this kind of night. Sarah stood 2 steps behind me, arms folded, a silent sentinel in black. Below, 200 of the East Coast's finest filled the ballroom like a jewelry box someone had shaken too hard. Crystal caught the light, diamonds flashed, laughter floated up in waves. At the head table, Mia glowed in ivory lace, Declan's hand over hers, both of them blissfully unaware that their future was already in ruins. Beatrice Vanderbilt glided to the microphone at exactly 20:02, emerald dress shimmering like poison. She tapped the mic twice. The room quieted instantly, the way only real money can make a room quiet. "Good evening, darlings," she began, voice honey over broken glass. "What a perfect night to celebrate love, family, and new beginnings." Her eyes found Mia, lingered a beat too long. "And now, a very special video tribute to the bride we all adore." The lights dimmed. Guests leaned forward, phones already half raised. I pressed one button on the tablet in my hand. Every screen in the house, 6 giant LEDs, 2 projection walls, even the discrete monitors in the bars, went black. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd. Beatrice's smile faltered. "Technical difficulties," she said tightly. "One moment." I leaned over the balcony rail and spoke into the house mic Sarah had patched for me. My voice rolled through the ballroom, calm, cold, and everywhere at once. "I'm afraid that video isn't available, Beatrice, but I found something far more interesting." Every head snapped upward. Phones swung toward me like compasses finding north. Beatrice's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Slide 1 lit the screens in stark white on black. United States Bankruptcy Court, Eastern District of New York. In re, Vanderbilt Family Holdings, LLC. Case number 124-BK11847. Chapter 11,
Filed October 31. Total liabilities $47.8 million. Gasps ricocheted off the vaulted ceiling. Slide 2, the foreclosure notice on the Greenwich estate, red stamp screaming default. Slide 3, the decline transaction for tonight's reception, $78,500, time-stamped 16:04 today, hard decline, insufficient funds. Slide 4, CCTV freeze frame of Beatrice sliding the cash envelope, audio waveform beneath it. I hit play. Her own voice filled the room, crisp and merciless. We break her first. Broken girls are easy to control. The ballroom detonated. Phones rose like 1,000 tiny guillotines. Beatrice lunged for the nearest screen as if she could rip it off the wall. Turn it off. Turn this off right now. Security, my security, materialized from the shadows, 6 of them in perfect formation, blocking every exit she might try. Slide 5, the $2,000 bribe receipt with her signature. At that exact moment, the ballroom doors crashed open. The valet from this afternoon burst in, eyes wild, holding his radio like a grenade. Mr. Preston Vanderbilt? Repo company just hooked your Lamborghini, said the lease is 5 months behind. Preston shot out of his chair, champagne splashing across the white tablecloth. That's impossible. Someone from the investor table left, loud and ugly. With what money, Preston? Beatrice clawed at a security guard, mascara already streaking. Do you know who we are? I leaned forward, voice soft enough that the mic still carried it like a blade. Bankrupt frauds who can't pay their bar tab. Declan stood slowly, staring at the screens, then at his mother. Tears cut clean tracks through his perfect wedding makeup. Mom, tell me this isn't true. Mia hadn't moved. She sat frozen, bouquet trembling in her lap, staring up at me like she was seeing a ghost. I let the silence stretch until it hurt. For those of you who don't recognize me in something other than a waistcoat, I said, my name is Olivia Harper. I own Harper Luxe Group. I bought this hotel 2 years ago for $42 million cash. I was asked to park in the service lot today because my Jeep embarrassed my family. Dad stood alone near the bar, knuckles white on his glass. Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I looked straight at Mia. The wedding can go forward if you want it to, but the Vanderbilts owe this hotel $78,500 they cannot pay. That's your choice, little sister, not mine. Then I turned to Beatrice, collapsed against a guard now, emerald gown pooling like spilled blood. You have 1 hour to vacate the property before I file criminal charges for theft of services and attempted fraud. Security will escort you. Preston made one last desperate grab for the head table mic. Sarah stepped in front of him, 5'4" of pure don't even try. 2 more guards appeared at his elbows. The ballroom doors opened again. This time it was quiet, methodical. 4 uniformed officers from the East Hampton PD, summoned by the silent alarm Sarah had triggered 10 minutes ago. Guests were already leaving in waves, clutching handbags, whispering behind manicured hands. Phones flashed like paparazzi at a car crash. Beatrice sobbed as they let her out, heels dragging. Preston followed, shouting threats no one bothered to listen to. Declan stood rooted, staring at the floor while his entire world was escorted past him in handcuffs and shame. I stayed on the balcony until the last Vanderbilt disappeared. Then I descended the grand staircase, Silk whispering with every step, Sarah at my side. The chandeliers felt too bright now, exposing every shocked face, every recording phone, every future society column headline. Mia still hadn't moved. Dad tried to step forward, hand outstretched, mouth working around words he didn't deserve to say. I walked straight past him. He was invisible now, just like he'd always wanted me to be.
The lobby looked like a crime scene photographed by Vogue. Camera flashes popped as the Vanderbilts fled through the revolving doors, Beatrice clutching her purse like a life raft, Preston snarling at the valets who refused to bring his, now repoed, Lamborghini back. A tow truck's amber light strobed across the marble as the last of the guests streamed out, whispering, recording, already texting page 6. I stood on the mezzanine landing, wineglass in hand, watching it all from above. Sarah handled the police report at the concierge desk. $78,500 in theft of services, attempted fraud, the works. The officers were polite. They knew whose property this was now. James Harper lingered near the grand piano, alone. Linda had vanished the second the first cop appeared. Dad's face was gray, the bourbon flush replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. He spotted me and started up the stairs, hand outstretched, voice cracking. "Liv, honey, I didn't know. If you just told me." I walked right past him. Didn't slow, didn't speak, didn't even let my shoulder brush his sleeve. I gave him exactly what he'd given me. Nothing. He stopped halfway up the stairs like he'd hit an invisible wall, mouth still open, hand hanging in the air. Invisible? How does it feel, Dad? Mia sat on the stone terrace steps in her ruined wedding dress, silk pooled around her like melted ice cream. Declan sat 2 feet away, bow tie undone, staring at the ocean as if answers might wash up with the tide. Neither of them had moved since the screens went dark. I descended the last steps and sat on Mia's other side. The night smelled of jasmine, salt, and burnt bridges. For a long time, nobody spoke. Finally, Mia's voice came, small and cracked. "You really own all this?" "Yes." "And you parked in the back because I asked you to?" "Yes." She started to cry then, ugly, shoulder-shaking sobs that smeared mascara down her cheeks and onto the $18,000 gown. Declan reached for her hand. She let him take it. I pulled 2 sheets of paper from my clutch, crisp Harper Luxe letterhead, and set them on the step between them. "The bill is $78,500. I'm not waiving it. You two want to be adults? You pay it." Declan looked up, eyes red. "How?" "Work." I tapped the contracts. "Laundry department for Mia, bellhop for Declan, $15 an hour, double shifts, weekends, holidays, 6 months if you live like monks, longer if you don't." Mia stared at the paper like it might bite her. Deadly. Declan picked up the pen first. His hand shook, but the signature was steady. Mia watched him for a long second, then took the pen. Her manicure was already chipped from clutching the bouquet too hard. She signed underneath his name without a word. I stood. "HR will see you Monday at 6 a.m. Uniforms are in your sizes." 6 months later, I watched them from the kitchen pass-through. Mia folding fitted sheets with military precision. Declan hauling Louis Vuitton trunks like he was born to it. They ate lunch on the loading dock, sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, laughing at something stupid one of the cooks said. No trust fund, no safety net, just each other and the work. 1 year to the day, the garden at Grand Hamptons Retreat bloomed white peonies and humility. Mia wore a simple cotton sundress she'd bought at a thrift shop in Bridgehampton. Declan wore a navy suit he'd paid for with his own tips. No veil, no train, no string quartet, just a guitarist from the village and 50 people who'd shown up when the money disappeared. Before the ceremony, Mia made one deliberate choice. Instead of the grand front entrance, she walked to the service door. Jimmy, the night security guard who'd watched me get dragged away that night, held it open with a grin. "After you, Mrs. Vanderbilt-to-be." She high-fived him and walked through the kitchen in her bare feet, past Marco flipping burgers for the reception, past Sarah who gave her a proud nod, straight out the side door into the garden where Declan waited under a driftwood arch. Same door, different meaning. I stood at the edge of the lawn with Sarah, champagne in hand.
Think they'll make it? She asked. They already did, I said. They chose real over fantasy. That's the hardest part. James and Linda were not invited. The guest list was small. People who'd stayed when the cameras left, who'd brought lasagna instead of gossip, who understood that dignity isn't inherited, it's built. The vows were short. The kiss was long. When the guitarist hit the final chord, Mia looked straight at me across the grass and mouthed 2 words I hadn't heard from her in years. Thank you. I lifted my glass in answer. Later that night, after the last dance, I signed the papers establishing the Harper Rising Fund, seed money for women starting businesses with nothing but grit and a dream. First recipient, a single mom in Red Hook who wanted to turn an old bodega into a cafe. I knew the look in her eyes. I'd seen it in the mirror for a decade. Some people called me cruel that summer. I didn't give Mia money. I gave her a mirror. Turns out, the reflection was the best wedding gift I could have offered. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the ones willing to walk through the service door with you, sleeves rolled up, ready to work for the life they want. That's the American way. You build your own table, and you decide who gets a seat.